tonight, it's really an honor for me to stand and introduce our speaker for tonight. I heard him last month at a breakfast at Macedonia for the Northern Baptist Association Women's Auxiliary, and he just blew us away with the level of insight, information, as well as his willingness to engage with those in attendance. His name is Reverend Dr. Randolph Meade Walker. He's a historian. He is also a former pastor of the pastor emeritus of Castelia Baptist Church in Memphis, Tennessee. He's a retired professor of history from Lemoyne Owens College in Memphis, Tennessee. He is just a genuine nice guy. And he's passionate about what he does. And that makes a difference. So I wanted, and after I heard him on that particular Saturday morning, I had to invite him to come to share with us, especially because this is Black History Month. And because of his background, and one of the things I did not share yet is that he's also a noted author. He has several books that he has written that are displayed over here. And you have an opportunity to take a look and purchase any if you would like. I Googled him, and there's just so much information out there, I just had to stop looking. But having said all of that, he also served as an interim pastor at First Baptist Church, and has done a great work. He grew up in this area, and he is one of a person that is most prominent and that has provided accolades, I guess, is an appropriate word, for those who were born here in the Northern Neck, but has excelled career-wise, professionally, and in so many different ways. But one of the things I love most about this man is he has allowed God to use him in some phenomenal ways. So having said all of that, I want to introduce to you Reverend Dr. Randolph Meade Walker.
Thank you, guys. My land, he has carried me so high, ain't but one way for me to go, and that's down. So pray for me. It seems like he was so generous that he may have stretched the truth a little bit. So I'm going to pray that God will forgive him for stretching the truth, and pray that he'll forgive me for enjoying it. It's just a joy to be with you tonight, and I shall share with you what Ben Hooks used to often say when he would give a speech. He'd always say, I promise I'm going to do what Elizabeth Taylor told her last husband, I won't keep you long. Oh, boy, what a joy it is to be here tonight. And tonight I want to share with you from the subject, Lights of Hope in the Despair of Oppression. Lights of Hope in the Despair of Oppression. I found the racist depiction of former President Barack Obama and his wife, Michelle, in national news on Friday, the 6th February 2026, extremely offensive. And the tasteless and ignorant cartoon had the couple's heads, as you know, superimposed on the bodies of apes. Such repugnant caricatures have historical precedents that date back to the 18th century. This was the beginning of pseudo-scientific racism. It lasts throughout slavery to justify the bondage of people of African descent. The justification was based on the cruel thesis that Africans were subhuman. Reconstruction brought a brief flare of hope for the equal treatment of the former slaves and the quasi-free blacks. After the end of Reconstruction, the humanity of people of African descent was attacked with a new intensity. This began what the historian Rayford Logan deemed the Black Nadir, which means the low point in African American history. From my studies as a historian and my personal experience as a salesman in the Deep South, I knew what it was like to be victimized by eugenics. It teaches hatred of people just because of their physical appearance. An example of this evil practice is the following fictional description of a black Union soldier given by a notorious novelist in the early 20th century. And he says, he had the short, heavy-set neck of the lower order of animals. His skin was coal black. His lips so thick they curled both ways up and down with crooked blood marks across them. His nose was flat, and its enormous nostrils seemed in perpetual dilation. The sinister bead eyes, with brown splotches in their whites, were set wide apart and gleamed ape-black under his scant brows. That's the way he describes this black Union soldier. Such writing is indeed a hate crime. It does not directly attack its victims with a gun or knife. However, it attacks with the more powerful and lingering, painful pen. Its lethal poison lingers for an indefinite time, as is the case with this quote. It was written in 1905, but its message is reenacted here in 2026 with the cartoon demeaning the Obamas. So this is nothing new, is what I'm trying to say. This is old school stuff. I was so grieved over the racist caricature of the former first couple of the country that I first wrote an angry and scathing response that indicted the perpetrator. However, my dear wife, Jerlene, as my helpmeet, gave me some valuable counsel. She said, cool down. Don't go out there like you feel right now. She told me that I was better than stooping to the level of the instigator of the racist attack. She told me that I needed to look for something positive that came out of this painful endeavor. Surprisingly, it did not take long or much effort to find evidence to support her suggestions. Readily, I found two who left a lasting impression upon my psyche for helpful healing. These two were both United States senators who are Republicans. Despite that similarity, they are diverse. The first is the Senate's only black Republican, and on the other hand, the second is a white Republican from the Deep South. For most of his nationally known public life, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina has been widely seen among African Americans as a contrarian to the racist interests. He has been perceived as a strong ally of the Trump administration. Thus, it is surprising to hear him speak so disapprovingly of the mean visual posting of the Obamas as apes on the president's social media page. As soon as the news of the posting was announced, it was also reported that Senator Scott said, "This is the most racist thing heard from this White House." Scott offered no excuses for the behavior. He did not suggest it was an erroneous action taken by a staffer, as was stated by the administration. Instead, Scott called it a racist act by the White House. The second almost instant condemnation that I wish to cite came from Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi. According to reports, Wicker immediately made his public condemnation. He unequivocally said the cartoon needed to be instantly taken down with an apology given. Wicker is from Mississippi, a state historically known as a notorious bastion of racial hatred. Its past political leaders included race baiters such as Theodore Bilbo and J.K. Vardaman. Also filibusters were the segregationists James O. Eastland and John Stennis, whose strategy in the United States Senate was designed to delay voting on the 1964 Civil Rights Bill that became the Act. All these lawmakers and others were known for their racist views, which were based on white supremacy. I have written elsewhere that in my upbringing, the three states that I was taught were the worst of the worst in racial relations were Mississippi, Alabama, and anybody care to guess what the third one is? No, Georgia. Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. And Virginia was bad, but it couldn't hold a candle to those three in their day. My work experience in Alabama and Mississippi, I never worked in Georgia, but certainly confirmed these two states' rankings as far as I am concerned. They were pretty tough states. On the other hand, Malcolm X took a cynical view of the entire United States. In a public address, the Muslim leader said, "If you're black, you're born in jail, in the North as well as in the South. Stop talking about the South. If you are south of the Canadian border, you are in the South." While I would concede that Malcolm's point that African Americans have incurred racism throughout the country is valid, yet in the South, the oppression was more overt and raw. Some people have even said that type of bigotry was made more honest than the systemic and institutional racism that was ingrained in the North. White racism continues to be a national problem throughout the entire country. It does seem that the South has been more progressive in racial advancement since the Civil Rights Movement. Perhaps this is because more emphasis were placed on these traditionally recognized bastions of hatred, while Northern problems were ignored and therefore unaddressed. Consequently, the Northern states' status quo of inequality largely went untreated. At any rate, when others were quiet or apologetic of the bigoted caricature of the Obamas, Wicker of Mississippi came out with a bold and ready condemnation. He spoke out when others who are more loquacious over the television on many political issues, such as South Carolina's Senator Lindsey Graham and Texas's Senator Ted Cruz, were both conspicuously silent on this issue. Lindsey Graham talks about everything, but you didn't hear nothing from him on this one. And Ted Cruz, he's been a little quieter lately, but he has a big mouth also. He didn't say nothing. Even though I preface my comments by citing two senators, Scott and Wicker, for their bold and heroic disapproval of the insulting depiction, there are other politicians who later were equally courageous in refuting the imposition of eugenics in the 21st century from the president's social media page. In fact, there was the description of the response as being an intra-Republican rejoinder. And I thought that was interesting. This is a positive development from a very negative act. This is a far cry from what the reaction would have been prior to the mid-1960s. Many people may consider this a snail's pace improvement in race relations. It may be. Nevertheless, it still is a pro-human improvement in many people's perspective. The humanitarian who champions justice and righteousness must celebrate victories no matter how small and distant they may be. This has been my philosophy in most of my adult life. Thus, my personal aspiration is to say something good to or about somebody every day. And I don't engage in false flattery. But there are so many, we hear so many bad things, but there are a lot of good people too. A lot of good people. And we need to find them when we run into them. We don't need to go looking under rocks and all that, but just in the run of a day, you'd be surprised how many good people you run across. How many people that are kind and polite. And it's not because they are being politically correct, because politics ain't got nothing to do with it. It just shows they got some good home training. Amen. That's all. Yeah. And if you got some good home training, you treat everybody decently and with respect and admiration. And so it is. The humanitarian champions that which is good and that which is respectful and that which is admirable. And so it is. There are so many thoughtless and inconsiderate statements issued every day by myriad people about other people. Yet the only way that change will come is if little by little and bit by bit, we celebrate the bright spots that we see. And they are there to be seen. All you have to do is open your eyes. There are good people of all shades and characters, all genders, all nationalities. I can't go on and on. But anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. I think that I cannot follow anybody that's going to triumph bigotry, hatred, and those kind of qualities. That's just not in me. I heard a man say once, and it has stuck with me all these years. I thought it was so narrow-minded, but he happened to be an African-American, and he said, I don't like baseball anymore because we don't see African-Americans playing. They aren't playing, and so I don't like baseball anymore. And I said to myself, you didn't like it before. If it's who's playing is the only reason you can cheer, right, something wrong with you. If you love the game, it doesn't matter what skin color somebody is. It doesn't matter who they are. I cheered when the two players that were hitting all the home runs that season. My memory's not the best now. Big guy from, Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa. I cheered both of them because I love the game. And even though they came back and said they were using drugs and all that, I don't know about that. But I know they gave me a thrill that year. I had a ball watching McGuire, Big Mac. That's what we called him. That's the reason I couldn't think of his name. We couldn't think of the nickname we called him. Big Mac and Sammy. They made it a fun year. And Sammy, he made Big Mac loosen up, and he said, he's the man. That's the man. That y'all go see him. He's the man. And that made Big Mac loosen up, and they just went back and forth. And it was just a fun season. But if you love the game, then it doesn't matter who is doing what? And I really have come to the conclusion the best player to ever play the game is playing right now, and that's Ohtani. Ohtani, we've never seen anything like him. Mm-hmm. Never seen anything like him. This young man, he pitches, he hits home runs, and Babe Ruth could pitch and hit home runs, but he couldn't steal bases. And Ohtani steals bases. He does it all. And anybody that loves the game, you got to cheer somebody like that. He is outstanding, and he's not black and he's not white. He's Japanese. Can't even speak English, but that doesn't matter. It's his performance on the field that you're cheering, that you are loving. And when someone does well, whether they're playing baseball, whether they're playing basketball, whether they winning the Nobel Peace Prize or the prize for literature or whatever, if they excel, if you are a person that really loves people, it doesn't matter what border they come from. It doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't matter what language they speak. They're a human being. And by the same token, when someone's in trouble, they're a human being, and we ought to be responsive to them. So anyway, that's what I have to share with you tonight. And I just was greatly disturbed when I heard about, this depiction of the Obamas. And as a historian, I really thought we had passed that period. But I got a wake-up call that told me, oh no, it's still here. And as painful as it is, as George Santayana says, he who does not study history is condemned to repeat it. And so, indeed, if you find out, what has happened before, maybe we can avoid those things and turn a different way and go forward. So I'll stop here, and do we have time for questions? And if anyone has comments or whatever, I'd be glad to entertain them. Yes.
Dr. Walker, I enjoyed your comments. We're living in what most of us would consider to be a pretty dark period. You, more than most of us, have a historical perspective. Can you share with us any ways in which your knowledge of history and of what's come in the past should give us, or can give us, some hope for our current situation?
That's a tough one. And I tell you why it's tough. And I don't want to get political, but I don't see how I can be anything else. But I think we got somebody in the White House like we've never had before. We've got, not even Andrew Johnson did the things that this man is doing. And so I think, and I really don't fault him, I fault the electorate. The electorate for being so uninformed. That's the best word I can use. So uninformed. Yeah. I think that we have had some of the, we had people that, I'm used to presidents that lead us, that care about us. When there's a natural disaster, they say, they say encouraging words to help you and that kind of thing. And I guess I just admired people like John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson. And really, as an African American, I want to say this, and may be kind of controversial, but I don't think it is. But I really think African Americans have made more progress under Southern white presidents than they have under any other. And then you go back, I'm talking about in my lifetime anyhow. I think we made tremendous progress under Lyndon Johnson. And then, you look at Jimmy Carter, and then Bill Clinton, and of course, Who was after? Somebody, I'm leaving somebody out, but I forgot now. But anyway, I think we've made. Huh? Oh Lord, no. I really think Bush is a decent human being, though. But I didn't agree with his policies and all of that. But I think he's a decent human being. I really do. I'm trying to think who else it is that I'm thinking of. But anyway, we've made tremendous progress in those areas. And I'm the kind of person, I believe in America. I really believe in America. I love this country. I love it. I've traveled a lot. I've gone to a lot of countries. In fact, at one time, a man condemned me because I had been to more countries than I had states. And he said, "You ought to be ashamed of yourself." And I said, well, it just so happens that way. Well, I didn't plan it that way. But anyway, I don't know how to tell you how we're going to dig ourselves out of this, because we've got a wedge that's steadily driving us apart. And I don't think that's the way God intended it. And we got people that call themselves Christians, but they follow someone that curses, use foul language in front of women, in front of children, in front of everybody, and yet they follow this individual. I don't understand that to save my life. The faith that I have doesn't allow me to follow. I don't even like to be around people that are cursing and vulgar and all of that kind of thing. And you know, everybody that says yay, yay doesn't mean that they are Christian. And so it's your actions speak louder than your words, as far as I'm concerned. And so I'll stop here. I can go on and on, but I don't have a magic answer. Good question. Yes, ma'am, and then I can make it.
Yeah. Only because you mentioned that we should hold on to positive things that happen. Usually I don't do a lot of sharing. You know, I just listen and I go along with things. But on this Friday, I'll be going up to Baltimore because my middle brother will be inducted, even though he has passed. He'll be inducted into the Baltimore Polytechnic Institute Hall of Fame. Because in 1952, and this was 2 years before Brown versus Board of Education, 12 black students were selected to go to Poly, which has a reputation throughout the United States, okay, to attend the 9th grade. I hold on to these things because I know what we went through, and I know that we got through it. In 1954, 7 years old, went to an all-white school. There were 3 of us in the entire school. What was our saving grace? Most were Jewish. I have a whole lot of friends that are different races, but I know what I went through, and I know that I succeeded, and the hope is there because God can get you through anything.
Amen. Good.
Yes.
And I think what you're doing here is just fabulous, that you have interracial conversations and get to know each other. And that's so important. Know some other people other than those that just are in your family or in your community or whatever, your church or whatever. Get to know some other people and be able to be bold enough, cross culture, cross racial barriers and that kind of thing. So I think that's one thing that's very important, is have conversations, get to know each other, know something about one another. I think the problem in America is we don't know nothing about each other. Really don't. And so this organization is is a good start. Yes, it was.
I don't know if I'm building on the first gentleman's question. But I think it's important in the race relationships in this country, and you're being a historian, to consider that this is nothing new. If 85 years ago, the Jews, Germans, what the Jews did to the Germans, the situation all over the world, what the Chinese and Japanese did, it seems like people, if they have a chance to fight other, they do. The Christians and Protestants in Ireland. So when you study history, to answer your question, I don't have an answer for how does this solve. But I think one thing you suggested I think is helpful is it's really about individuals deciding what's good and practicing that and the ripple effect of individuals. But I think when sometimes we're very used to just talking black and white. There's black and Native American, there's black and Mexican in the Southwest. There's just a history of people choosing to hate or people choosing to not hate and love. And I think you do have to make a choice.
And I'm gonna even throw another one at you, another wrinkle.
Yeah, sure.
African American and African. Because their skin is black doesn't mean that they think of each other as one. They don't. They don't.
I chuckle because my son-in-law is Nigerian.
Okay. All right. And
I'd
So-
just like to add something in real quick. I just finished a book called Critical Race Theology,
okay.
and the fellow who did that is at Vanderbilt. I don't know if you're familiar with Juan Floyd Thomas, but been doing a lot of reading about this, and as I've been listening to everybody, I think if there is hope and if there's proven times we made progress, if you look at Dr. King and you look at the 60s and you look at the Freedom Riders, and I'm still trying to decide if LBJ really changed in his soul, but he did some good things. But appealing to people's better nature, look at what just happened in Minneapolis. And, this critical race theology book and other things, the pattern is if you do that, and whether it's the gospel or whether it's being a good Jew or a good Buddhist or what have you, and you said this earlier, you see people every day. How are you going to interact with them? And I just try to, wake up every day and say, okay, I'm going to try and do something, and that's one thing. I've been busy with some other things. I haven't been to this group in a long time, but I'm going to come back and try to contribute. But that's my one contribution is that's where hope is with me.
It's a good way.
It's this group or individually or as organizations or as people of faith. I'm an Episcopalian, and we're trying to live the gospel. We're not trying to live white Christian nationalism. And I'm sure everybody else who looks like me in here is of a similar mind. So, thank you.
I think everybody's on to something. It begins with each of us and how we interact with each other. Yes, ma'am. How you doing? It's good to see you.
What I'm just going to mention is why I feel so close to you. Actually, when Vash and I talked about going to a school that everyone was Jewish, and she was black. Hi, Vishta. Was that Dr. Meade came when we last year in September of a whole year ago. We tried to have black and white schools, the early schools, and so he spoke about Highland Chapel School, which was started, and Holly Graded School. Those two schools were white women, white abolitionists, come down from New York who were Quakers and who started these schools. So he spoke in terms about Holland Chapel School. But the point about the Jewish was that Julius Rosenwald was the president of Sears Roebuck and felt very, very, what would you say, downtrodden as a Jew. So he put his feelings of being downtrodden for others who were even more downtrodden, and that's the blacks. So he started the Julius Rosenwald schools. That over 5,000 schools were done, and there were more than 300 here just in Virginia for black children. And when Dr. Meade spoke about that, Then you came to the Julius Rosenwald High School because not only did his mother, your mother was a teacher, right? Wasn't
She was at Howard.
At Holland. And then Holland Chapel School, and then he and his sister came, and they were actual graduates of the Julius Rosenwald High School.
Well, she was, not me. I was too young.
But it was so touching to have someone who actually grew up here, did well in life, and came back to discuss that with others that are here now, that are not in touch with what happened back 40, 50, 60 years ago. That it's just so nice to have a kind of a perspective of time. And for you have that. And it was such a delight. And he was so nice because when he came to give his speech that day, he said, uh-oh, you've got two choices. You can either have my sermon for Sunday, or I better go back home and get my tongue. If you can't laugh, you're lost. It's our sense of humor that's so wonderful, too.
I was rushing that evening, trying to get to Highly Graded School, and I picked up my sermon rather than my historical notes, and I didn't discover it until I was there. And the audience was so gracious; they waited for me to go home and come back and get it because I live in Callio, so it wasn't that far. But you hit something that kind of struck a note. This book that I wrote, which is the last book I wrote, called "Influences: People Who Have Helped Shape My Life for the Better." I really, you talk about me coming back home and all. Most of the people that's in here are people, even though I lived for 51 years in Memphis, Tennessee, and there were some people in Memphis that influenced me that's in here. But the majority of these people were right here in the Northern Neck. And it was amazing. It was kind of an epiphany writing this book, because I had no idea some of these people influenced me as they did until I sat down and started writing and meditating and thinking, and it was amazing. And many of them had no idea they influenced me. Some of them didn't even know who I was, but I knew them. And it was amazing how they inspired me. They gave me a fire burning within me. In fact, two of the men in here, Alonzo Brumley and Olden Day, they were in our neighborhood, and they were side by side neighbors, and they were actually cousins of mine, and both of them told me back in 1997, they said, "We need you to come back home. We need you here." And I never forgot that. I didn't come in 97. I just didn't feel God was leading me here at that time. But once I retired and I came back, because they were still echoing in my brain, "I need you here." And it seemed almost analogous to the call that Paul got from the man that said, "Come over into Macedonia and help us." Well, the Macedonia was my hometown. And so I came back, and it's been a blessing to me. I've learned so much since I've come back. And I'm here to just do what I can to help uplift humanity. And that's really it. And I don't have any hidden agenda or nothing else like that. I am not trying to get rich, because if I was, I'm too old for that. Whatever I've done in life, I've done. But anyway, I'm just here to try to do God's will. And if I can help people, that's what I'm all about. And I've got a couple of men that's working with me this year. I've planted last year I was hindered a little bit because I had a health issue that hindered me. But we're going to plant a community garden. And one of my pensions is food insecurity. I don't care who it is. I think everybody ought to be able to have a full stomach. And especially children and senior citizens that are hungry. It grieves me So we're going to grow this food garden, and anybody that wants it, people say, well, they're going to come and steal. I said, well, they be stealing from themselves. It's for them. And so I'm planning on, I haven't talked to my other two partners yet, but we're going to have a full garden at one place, and then I've got another place. I got a deer problem there because, and I know the deer will eat up everything that they can get, but I'm going to grow subterranean things like potatoes and sweet potatoes and maybe even onions. I don't think deer bother them. I don't guess they will. But anyway, we're going to give that a shot this year and see how many people we can feed. I saw in the Times-Dispatch soon after I moved back that in Virginia there are 700,000 people that are food insecure. I suspect most of them are in Southwest Virginia. I suspect that, but I mean, I know all of them are not, because I've done some research on the northern neck, and we got some people, especially children, that are very vulnerable. And so we're going to do what we can to attack that. And so rather than just sitting down writing, I want to be doing things. I told people in Memphis I was engaging in practical theology now.
So Dr. Walker, thank you very much for coming and sharing your thoughts. As a historian, I have some questions about things like museums being directed to take information down that is of historical importance. What are some ways that you can think of to teach our young people about things that happen that will get lost because that information is being taken away? I read for my book club last fall, opened my eyes. It was called Fever in the Heartland, and it was about the Ku Klux Klan almost getting into the White House in the 1920s. And I was like flabbergasted. I had no earthly idea that had happened. It wasn't just, it was differences. It could have been anybody. At that time, it was also white immigrants, not just blacks and not just Asians, not just anybody who spoke with a different accent, Italians, whatever.
Right.
So but I was just astounded. And now to hear about these museums where they're taking things away, that it hurts my soul.
Yes, it is. And it's amazing how much effort is being expended to keep us dumb.
Yeah.
Isn't it crazy? But I believe we ought to be willing to learn, be open to everybody. That's the reason I'm big on this interracial conversation. We can learn from each other. We can learn, the experiences that each other has had and history and all of that. I think one of the things, at least I have an ambition to do. I got more ambition than I have probably time at this point. But one of the things I want to do is open a museum. And I've got tons of books that my fourth bedroom now is a warehouse. And my wife tells me, she said, one of these days we're going to free up this room and we can actually have people sleep in the bed rather than your books in here. But I brought all of these books and I really just haven't found a place to put them yet. But I'm planning on having a library, a museum, and a car museum. Those are my three ambitions. Now, how I'm going to do all that, I don't know, because time is running short and money is short. And so anyway, but you have dreams. You have dreams. And I do have a lot of books that I am pretty certain are pretty rare. That I doubt if anybody in the United States has some of the books that I have, because some of them I got in Africa. And I collected them, and I'm kind of like Schomburg was in New York. I'm a bibliophile. I love collecting books, and I've been doing it all my life. And And now I've got all of them just in boxes, and every time I need one, I can't find it. I don't know which box to look at. But anyway, that's one thing I think, is that private museums and private libraries are going to be more and more valuable as we go along, and so we can't let the record be lost. And that's the reason I'm writing these books and things, is because when I was really writing this book, I went to a church that one of the gentlemen in here was a member. I won't call his name, I won't call church name, but I asked him, I said, do you all have any pictures? I was looking for pictures. I said, do you have any pictures of this man who was a very prominent member of this church? And they said, well, who is he? And he died, I think it was in the early 20th century. And nobody, the people that were at the church at the time, didn't know who he was. And I couldn't believe this. This man was a very prominent businessman in the Northern Neck. In fact, he was instrumental in the church building their new facility that they had. Well, it was new because it was built in the 50s. But it was amazing. The people at the church didn't even know who he was. And so that's how quickly we forget if we don't keep things documented and written down. And yes.
Yeah, that's one of the things, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that we have tried to do in this area through the Northern Baptist Association and other organizations is for the churches to document their histories. I don't know if you've ever gone to our website, but we've documented, identified from the very beginning, the pastors and the things that were accomplished over the years, okay, which is something that will enable us to look back and then share that with not just the community, but also I'm finding that many of our Black kids don't know their history. And, you know, one of the things that I did, I intentionally take, my children are older than adults, but we would take them on trips and expose them to areas that they've never lived or never have been exposed to before, so they can learn about people that look like them and what they went through. Take them to Charleston and other parts of Georgia. I am from Georgia.
All right. God bless
So
you.
I understand.
You survived.
I was hoping that it was a joke in answering your question, but those were some of the things that many of our children are unaware of, and for whatever reason, they don't embrace their heritage. I did a sermon this past Sunday on being proud of your heritage and what that means, okay? And we have a responsibility as adults to share not only with our own children, but other children around us, because I need to know and want to know a bit more about your history and all of that, because it helps us stand against much of the hatred
Right.
and misinformation
Absolutely.
and disinformation that is put out on social media. And I think social media could have been a great thing, but it's used oftentimes in a very negative manner to accomplish and to plant seeds of distrust and hate. And it's just difficult for us to find a way to get past that. But it's incumbent upon all of us to do what we can to instill hope in our communities. And it's gonna take organizations like this to come together to talk about the issues, learn from each other, okay? But then we have to tell people who are outside of this room what's going on here.
Yeah.
And encourage them to be a part of it because it's about them as well. And it's just a very valuable thing that I believe is going on. That I would love for it to be contagious.
Well, it will. You planted the seed, God will get the increase. Yes.
Dr. Walker, you may have picked up at the beginning that this organization was founded in 2015. And from the beginning, we've been challenged to get participation from African Americans. You look at the group here, and most of these folks are from the African American folks are from Tyrant's Church. A few are not. We would call a comeback here.
At least I'm not a come here.
We have trouble getting born here's, come here's, and come back here's from the African American community to participate. Do you have any insight from your perspective in how we could make interracial conversations more?
Well, I'm going to make myself a committee of one to spread the word and invite people and all of that. And I planned on coming last month, but the weather intimidated me. That's the reason I didn't make it in January. But anyway, yeah, we'll get on the as the old saying was, we'll get on the grapevine and get the word out and do what we can to get people coming. And we'll see what happens. And because I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I just believe that the way to solve the race problem is to get to know each other. And the more people know each other, the better to be. I was telling my wife the other day, we were talking about what is it that allows people to scale the ladder of success. And so I told her, it is not your pedigree. It is not your IQ. It is not anything of human derivation. And I told her it was the grace of God. And I gave her an example. I said, I have made substantial money in the stock market, and not a whole lot. Don't think I'm Elon Musk or nothing like that. Far from it. But I have made more than I ever thought I'd make in the stock market. And I told her, guess who was the tutor that taught me how to trade stocks? She says, who? I said, one of the most racist people I ever met in my life. And he and I were working together. We both worked for General Motors at the time. And we were working together for a week, I think it was. And one day, he couldn't resist bragging to me about money he had made in the market. And I said to him, I had just read something that Frederick Douglass said. He said when he was a child, he always played with little white boys, and they always played school, and he always was a student. They were the teachers, and he said that's how he learned his ABCs. And so I had that fresh in my mind, and so when he was telling me about, what was going on with him in the stock market, I said, Harold, you're a smart guy. I said, how does this work? Now here I am. I hadn't at the time, but I have since. I've gone all the way from, I didn't go to kindergarten. We didn't have kindergarten then, but first grade through a PhD program. And nowhere did anybody teach me how to buy and sell stock, how to negotiate trade, how to buy a house, because I wasn't a business major. You oughtn't have to be a business major to know those basic things. Nobody told me nothing. But Harold Gunlock told me one afternoon, everything I needed to know. I knew you had to buy low and sell high. I knew that, but I didn't even know how to get started. I didn't know, where do you find a broker and all that kind of thing. He schooled me on everything I needed to get started. And that was in 1974. And I started trading stock in 1974, and it's amazing what has happened since then. And I learned it from one of the most racist people that I've ever met. And so it just goes to show you, don't shut yourself off from anybody, because God's grace can open up doors from places that you never thought that would bless you. And so converse with everybody, talk with everybody, be kind to everybody. You don't know where your blessing's gonna come from. Don't mistreat nobody, because your biggest adversary might be your biggest blesser. You never know. And so anyway, I thought I would share that for whatever it's worth. And in this book, Influences, I've got some of everybody in here. Everybody I think on the cover is African American, but actually within the covers, I've got the oldest man that I ever met in my life, who also is the only person I ever met that was a slave. He actually had been a slave. His name was Joe Kearney. And I'm convinced Joe Kearney lived to be about 121 years old, even though his family said he was 111, but he had to be older than that to have been a slave. So I'm convinced he was about 121 when he died. But he told me, he said, I found out I was free when the Yankees marched through Mississippi and told us we were free. And he was just such an humble, sweet man. I used to love to listen at him, even though he was a person of few words. I always gave him my full attention every time I heard him. And I learned so much from him. And one thing that he believed God blesses an obedient child. If you are obedient and respectful toward your parents, you'll live, and that's what he credited his long life to. I was an obedient child. And I never forgot that from Joe Kearney. And so it's a wide variety. And really, the man that influenced my preaching as it is now was one of my professors at Memphis Theological Seminary, Paul Brown. Paul Brown, I knew him before I went to seminary, but I really just drank deep of his teaching there. And he taught me a new style of preaching. I had been preaching, the traditional three-point sermon and all of that they had talked about. And he said, in the 21st century, people's attention span isn't as long as it used to be. And so you got to have an introduction that grabs people's attention and holds them there. And you can't hold them for an hour and a half anymore. You got to get it over with, sit down, and make the impact. And so he taught me the mechanics of inductive preaching as opposed to deductive preaching. And it was a powerful instrument. And so I've got him in here, Paul Brown. And Paul Brown happened to have been Anglo-American. And then there was another man that was a businessman that I worked with one day named Buck Buchanan, who also was Anglo-American. And we were going to be doing some selling together that day. And we happened to meet at the GM Training Center. And while we were waiting for whatever we was going to do in the meeting, Buck got a napkin and started drawing on the napkin. He drew a pyramid, and just off the cuff. And he said, I've been thinking, and there are three corners to life if you're going to be successful and happy. You got to have a good job that you are satisfied with, that you are fulfilled with. So that's number one. You got to have, well, not necessarily in that order, but he said that's one thing. You got to have a job. He said you got to have family. You got to be dedicated to that family and do the right thing by them. And then thirdly, if you're going to be right in those two areas, you got to have a good relationship with God, and you got to be established in his church. And I never forgot what Buck drew on that napkin that day. And it made a lot of sense. The three corners to successful life: church, family, and work. And so he's in this book. So anyway, it's amazing how you picked up things from people that you didn't know that they were going to be an influencer, but they end up being. And I differentiate in the book, there's a difference between an influencer and a mentor. A mentor simply tells you how to do what you may already buy into. You just don't know how to do it. But the mentor tells you how to do it. But an influencer is somebody that influences you to a way of life that you hadn't thought of before. And it makes you a convert. And so anyway, I enjoyed that, and I learned a lot. And like I said, many of the people in here are from the Northern Neck. And so I'm going to hush because I'm talking more than I wanted to. But anyway, thank you all.
We want to thank Dr. Walker for sharing. Did anyone have any more questions or anything for any of us? Yes, ma'am.
I just have, on that last note, I'd just like to make a comment that there was a gentleman in our area, Mr. Bill Moran, and he worked at the Food Lion for years and years, and he passed away, and nobody ever really knew where he came from or what the significance was and why he was here and that sort of thing. But after he passed away, his family very kindly, he was from Northern Virginia, I believe. Anyway, and well, actually, he was from South Carolina. His son was in South Carolina. But they came back and had a funeral service at St. Stephen's. And I went to that, and it was absolutely beautiful because it was so gentle and it brought everybody in. You had the family, you had the people from around here that wanted to have some sort of remembrance because they all knew of Mr. Bill. But he was a quiet influencer because he was there and he interacted with all of the people that shopped at Food Lion. And I know for a fact of at least one person who was a very volatile Trump supporter who would come in and have his own opinions about blah, 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 you know. And Mr. Bill would say, now, why do you feel that way? And he would quietly, and people would avoid this gentleman, you know. They'd see him come down the aisle and they'd say, oh no, here it is. But Bill was not afraid of that, and he would calmly say, now, what do you think would happen if this and that and the other? So a lot of times, I think we feel like, what can we do with this horrible situation we're faced with right now? And we can just be like Mr. Bill. We can just be kind to that one person, here, there, the other place, and don't be afraid to be nice to them, even if they are totally not on the same page as yourself. And the other thing is to go to funerals. Because people are quiet, especially here. You've got a lot of retirees, and you don't know what their life was like before they came here. And at that service, they had a new little minister. I think he was just ordained, and he had just come to St. Stephen's. And he was so effervescent with this funeral. He said, I didn't know Mr. Bill. but he definitely is a person that I would love to have met. I can just feel him taking me up in his plane and flying up. He was just the cutest little thing I ever saw. And but it just made you realize what a rich area we live in.
Man.
And you don't have enough time to meet everybody.
No.
But you certainly can get a lot of information at funeral. It's wonderful. So, try it out sometime. My mother and grandmother we used to go around to all of the funerals and take flowers. We would clean the gravestones, and that was the thing. So.
And I think what you have shared is of tremendous value because oftentimes you meet people, they have this ideology, but when you sit down with them, it oftentimes tends to take down some of those barriers because you are willing to listen
Right.
to what they have to say. And oftentimes that's all people want.
Right.
But what you also do is you have an opportunity to influence potential change and give them something to consider that they had not thought about. And that could change their perspective on things. But the main thing is just being willing to listen. When we started the Community Liaison and Advocacy Council, one of the things that I ensured that we had were individuals who had a different perspective. I invited Republicans to come and have lunch with me because I wanted to hear what they thought about policing because they had a different perspective than I did. But at least that gave me an opportunity to share a few things with them, not in a accusatory or a direct manner, but just plant a little seed here and there to give them something to think about, maybe a little bit different. And it let them know that I'm willing to listen. And sometimes that's all people want to know, or believe that you're willing to at least listen to them and not attack, because you put up additional barriers, but just having that willingness and to be kind in the midst of all of that. So we still have a lot of work to do. There's a lot that we can accomplish, but we cannot be afraid or reluctant to stand up to those challenges. We've got to let our voices be heard, but not in an accusatory manner, but one that is genuine, that gives something of value to consider, because they're the ones that have to make the decision to change. But it cannot be done under duress.
Man.
Yes, ma'am.
So there's so much extremeness right now, especially with social media, because it's really easy to do that. You're not sitting at a table with somebody, like you said, barriers are broken down when you're face to face. And, you know, the extreme attitudes, there's not a whole lot of critical thinking that goes into that. It's just a sweeping generalization, and that's it, and you don't have to think about it because you've got it figured out. When it comes to conversation and what we're doing here, how do we go out into the world? I think a few of you have said it, you just said it right now. Don't be afraid to ask questions, don't be afraid to use your voice, don't be afraid to disagree. But the challenge comes when you do get mad. I have a good friend who has very opposite political views from myself, and it's challenging at times not to get mad. And you know, you want to call them names or just, you know, write them off. But how to keep that conversation going by seeing the good, asking why. And one of you over there said, ask why. you're the food line guy. Why do you feel that way? Keep asking why. Get to the root of it. Why? Well, why? And then why? Why? And maybe get to the root of it. And don't be afraid to just keep calm. Don't get mad. To keep the conversation going. Because there's a huge disconnect, right? Collectively and individually. And I think that, the management trickles down to the, we've got an administration that is, as far as I can tell, it's thriving off of disconnection.
Did you want to respond to that? Or?
Well, the amazing thing I share with you is another book that I wrote. This was this one was about my experience with General Motors in the Deep South. I worked for them for 15 years when I first went to Memphis, and I have in here 3 rules that I had for myself. I was a salesman. My job was to sell automobile parts. And so when I went in, I was nothing but a kid. I was fresh out of college, 22 years old. And so most of the people I dealt with were elderly white men, older white men. Let me say that. They weren't elderly, but they were older. And I'm 22 years old, black, scared to death in the Deep South, and went there over the objections of my parents. So I sat down one day and meditated, and I made 3 rules for myself. That I didn't talk about religion, I didn't talk about race, and I didn't talk about religion, race, and politics. Yeah, those are the 3. Yeah, thank you. I didn't talk about them. I found what we had in common. And after all, the company didn't hire me to talk about those things. They hired me to talk about business. So that was the one thing that I had in common with everybody that I called on, whether they were 60 years old or whether they were 26 years old. It was business. And so I found out by talking about what I had in common with them allowed me to have a relationship with them. And actually, I wasn't there to be a pastor. I wasn't calling on these people to be a pastor, but I ended up pastoring a lot of them. A lot of them that were older white males. When I would come in, they would say, Meade, you get around, you find out a lot of things. What do you see? Should I expand my business? What do you think? And I was just floored. Here I am, a youngster, and these old, well-experienced white males in the Deep South was asking me what I thought about what they should do about their business. And it was amazing how God gave me grace with all of them. And my thing is, one of the 2 things I learned with General Motors, I learned about people and I learned about money. First of all, people are people. I don't care what color they are, what gender they are. People are people, and all of them have needs, fears, desires, and all of that. I went into one business, I never will forget this, in Jonesboro, Arkansas. It was a one-man operation. And this man was in there, and when I walked in, he was drunk as a skunk. And I listened at him. You're talking about the importance of listening. I just listened at him. And what was bothering him was his mother had come to live with him and his wife. And his wife didn't want her in their house. And he's caught between these 2 women that he loves. And he chooses to get drunk to deal with it. And I sit down and I talk with him. Here I am, a young kid talking to this elderly man. And I said, think about it. I said, you're going to ruin yourself. I say, if somebody comes in here and wants some brake pads for a Ford, and you give them brake pads for an Oldsmobile, they're going to get mad, and they're going to tell everybody they know how bad you were. And I said, you are killing yourself doing this. I said, you got to straighten up. You got to get a hold of yourself. You got to get a plan to deal with this problem. And tell these 2 women it's unfair for them to unload on you the way that they unloaded. And it's amazing. When I left, he thanked me so much for coming by that day. He didn't buy nothing, but he thanked me. But he thanked me for coming by and listening at him, and he was just elated. And it was amazing. I made tremendous friends just by being intrusive, just listening at people. And it was amazing how we can actually bond with people just listening at them. And now some people didn't give me a chance to listen. They would tell me, I don't need nothing today. That means I don't want to be bothered with you, you know. And so I found that I moved on. I just worked with people that wanted to work with me. And God gave me grace. And that's what I was telling my wife, that's the greatest way that we scale the ladder of success. It ain't because of human efforts, but it's because of God's grace. And God gives us grace with people. One last story from General Motors I'll share. I was in Florence, Alabama one time. This is when AutoZone was first getting started. And I was selling them batteries back in those days. And they had a new store that had opened up in Florence, Alabama. And they asked me to come down there that Saturday. Normally I didn't work on Saturdays, but I went there for that store opening. And I was down there in Florence, Alabama, and this gentleman came in, middle-aged, bib overalls, run over shoes, and he saw the sign that said Delco batteries, and he jumped as high as I don't know who. And he said, I wouldn't buy one of those Delco batteries if they were the last thing on the planet to buy. And I said, well, sir, I see you are upset and you got a problem. Let's see what we can do about it. And so I just approached him that way. And of course, I didn't know whether he was mad because of Delco batteries or he was mad at me because I was black. That was in the back of my mind. You know, I'm in Alabama. And I told you about what I had been taught about Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia. But anyway, I listened at him and I said, well, do you have the car here? And he said, no. I said, could you get the car here? He got it, brought it there. I went out and looked at it, and I found out immediately what his problem was, that his fan belt was loose, and the car wasn't charging. And I pointed that out to him, and it's amazing how I made a foe into a friend. And he said, is that what's wrong with my car? I said, yeah, it's not your battery. The battery's not a problem. I said, it's just not getting juice in it because your fan belt is loose. And, oh, he left there praising and said, I'll buy Delco batteries from here on out. But a lot of times we can turn situations around if we de-escalate. I think a lot of people are being killed today because there's no de-escalation. Things are getting out of hand, people coming in, they doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Those two people in Minnesota had no business being killed. George Floyd had no business being killed. Sandra Bland, Lord knows she had no business being killed. There are so many useless and foolish deaths because people are not using patience and common sense and civil action with one another. So I think that can go a long way. And my daddy used to say, somebody's got to have some good get-along sense. And indeed they do. All right.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank y'all so much for being here tonight. Are you on our email list? Is everyone on the email list? Is there anyone that is not? Okay. If you would, just come up and give us your email address and name, and we'll make sure we put you on our list so we can share information with you.
Okay.
Again, and tell someone else that's not here, that's not a part of Interracial Conversations, about what we're doing here, and invite them to come and be a part of this, because we want to hear from them. We want to know what they're thinking, what they're feeling, but also we want to find out what they can do to help us improve life for people here in the Northern Neck, because that should be our goal.
Man.
And we have done, yes ma'am.
When is the next meeting?
It's every fourth Tuesday,
Every fourth Tuesday.
5:30 right here at Mount Holly.
Okay.
Okay? So please continue to tell people about it. And let's thank Dr. Walker